All right, so I'm very excited to introduce our next speaker of the night. Her 3 fun facts. She has a cat named Chalupa Batman. She once interviewed someone at NASA, kind of, and she has been to a pirate metal concert. I really want to hear more about that. Everybody, please help me welcome Amandah Wood.
Figure out which hand I want what in. Okay, awesome. So this was me probably about 5 years ago. You can see I have a bit of a love for weird hair colors. And I'm standing in front of my desk at my very first job out of university. I was probably about a year into the role at this point. So some of you might know the charcoal group in town. I was doing kind of marketing, community development, and building an online presence for Beer Town, Bauer Kitchen, and all of their other restaurants as well. And so as a new grad, as you can imagine, I was doing a lot of things for the first time, learning how to do a lot of things for the first time. And I found it really challenging. Things like managing my time most effectively, how to have the most impact, managing relationships. And another piece of this job was that I spent a lot of time at networking events. And if you ask anyone who knows me, I'm not really a huge fan of small talk or surface level conversation. And so I was finding myself at these events asking people, what they did for work and, what they, how it was going. And I'd get a lot of canned, well-polished responses as you normally do at those events. And I had this really strong desire to have these candid conversations with people about what doing work you love really looks like. What's hard about it? What's challenging? What makes it meaningful for people? And so that was really the spark for starting the website Ways We Work. So it was a website that was entirely dedicated to interviewing individuals about how they did the work that was meaningful to them. Oh no. Okay. And people loved it. So I think what really made the site take off is people related to and were almost comforted by seeing these people that they either admired in the community or had idolized for a while online. Seeing that these people didn't have it all figured out either. That they had different challenges, different struggles that they faced at work and in their career. And I really poured my whole heart into it. I custom designed and built the website a million times over. I started doing Skype interviews instead of sending people questions over email because the responses were so much more authentic and interesting. And then one day, someone added the website to Product Hunt. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with Product Hunt, but it's a website really popular where you can add new and upcoming products to sort of show the world. And it was upvoted about 600 times. So I woke up to more traffic on the website in a single day than we would see in an entire month at that point. And that really kicked things off. From that point on, there was sort of thousands of visitors all around the world reading the website every single month, which was super, super exciting. And then around this time, too, I had a bit of a career pivot myself. I'd kind of been dabbling in building websites, designing websites, and so I made a move into doing front-end development full-time. And then my friend Matt, who's here, he loved the site. He'd been following it for a while, and he came to me with this idea of doing team features. So he was like, a lot of great work actually happens in teams. I'd love to see if we could add to the site and do some team profiles. And I loved the idea. And Matt was, a designer, a developer. He's also a super talented photographer. Most of the photos in my slides are by him. And so it was this really awesome partnership, and we really took the site to the next level. Around the same time, though, I lost my job. It turns out that I realized I hated writing code all day. I really missed interacting with human beings and collaborating with people. And truth be told, my heart was really in doing this, in doing Ways We Work. So no surprise that they fired me. But I didn't have too much time to be sad about losing my job because really shortly after, we got confirmation from a team at Facebook that they were open to us coming down and doing a piece on one of their design teams. So Matt and I, 2 kids from Waterloo, flew off to California, and we got to spend a whole day with a search design team from Facebook. So we got to sit down on some design sprints and interview different members of that team. And so, as you can imagine, this opened up a ton of doors for us, and we got to do a bunch of profiles on teams that we really admired. Mostly in the Valley, but also here in KW and Toronto. And so people loved these. They loved hearing about like how teams at these big companies worked, about the individuals who were on them, and it really like brought everything to a human level. So the site continued to grow. We were getting more and more readership. It was really awesome, really exciting. But as the site was growing, my bank account was shrinking. And I knew like I had to start to figure out, how is this going to make me money? How can I actually sustain myself doing this? And so we tried a bunch of different things. We tried just getting companies to sponsor the site, people who knew the name and were really excited about it, sponsoring it, and we had some success there. We also tried doing a bit of a unique twist on a job board. So that had some success as well, but it quite honestly took a lot more effort to run than it ended up being worth. And then the other thing that we tried was sponsored content. So there were a handful of companies who actually wanted to pay us to come in and do features on them. And Matt and I always felt a little bit uncomfortable about that, because the whole idea was to get like candid, honest accounts on the site. And so we felt weird about getting paid to do it. We did it a couple of times, and so between all of these 3 revenue sources, we had some success, but mostly it was just enough money to kind of put back into doing these trips and back into the website. So, I mean, around this time, I was starting to be pretty stressed financially, getting stretched pretty thin. I also found that I was spending all of my time on the things that were going to maybe potentially make us money, and a lot less time on the things that I loved, which was interviewing people and connecting with them all over the world. I also became pretty obsessed with the numbers. I would be kind of looking every week, like, did this interview do better than last week? Did we get more subscribers? Are we growing? Are we getting to, a unique viewership that like companies are going to pay to be sponsored on the site? And so I was really starting to burn out, quite honestly. I was in this loop of thinking about the numbers and trying to grow the site and doing whatever I could to do that. And the other piece is, while these like team visits look super glamorous and these photos are amazing, I'm glad that I have them, self-employment 95% of the time actually looked like this. I won't leave this up too long because you'll probably get dizzy, but I mean, I was broke. I was in a lot of debt at this point, and I was in this loop of like trying whatever I could to try and make the site money. I was not, as you can imagine, or as some of you might be familiar with, when you're burnt out and really burnt out, you don't enjoy any of the things that you used to enjoy. I didn't enjoy any part of doing the site. I was waking up exhausted, sitting at my desk, like totally burnt out every single morning. So I think, had any spark of inspiration or any idea of how I could make this work had come to me at that time, I probably had zero energy or motivation to even execute on it. And then the light at the end of the tunnel. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the company Envision. So they're a design prototype tool, fairly well known in the design community. They really loved our content. They'd sponsored the site a couple of times, and one day they reached out and said that they were potentially interested in acquiring us. And I sat there at my desk, so excited. I was like, oh my God, like this is the golden ticket, this is it. Like the months of struggle and like debt and everything has been leading up to this. It was meant to be. We're gonna get acquired, we're gonna make a boatload of money, and it's gonna be amazing. I'm not gonna lie, I probably poured all of my mental and emotional energy into this deal happening. It was kind of like the last thread of my sanity at this point. And then we didn't get acquired. So after a number of emails and a phone call with the CEO, it just wasn't a fit, which more often than not is the case. But I pretty much completely crumbled at this point. I was probably around $20,000 in debt. There wasn't really an end in sight, and so my light at the end of the tunnel ended up looking a lot more like that. Looking back, I think it's really easy for me to see the ways that we could have done it, the ways that we could have made it work. Sponsored content in particular probably could have been our bread and butter. But the real realization that I had was that I didn't want it to be a business. It was never what I set out to do. It wasn't something that I wanted to make money from. And so I wrote this post shortly after I decided that it was finally time to get a real job. And one of my favorite writers, Jamie Barron, shared this quote, which really hit home for me. And so I want to read it because I think it really resonates. But the shadow side of doing what you love is that suddenly the thing you love now has to make money for you. And money plus love is not always a symbiotic relationship. For example, to turn a creative hobby into a capitalistic venture is to take away, at least in part, a purity of the experience of that hobby. There's a shift that happens when your passion no longer is a thing you do in your free time, but is a thing you do in order to allow yourself free time. And so this was really true for me because I had completely disconnected from why I started in the site in the first place, which was messages like this. Hearing from people who had resonated with the interviews, who had maybe even it helped them work through something, or they'd gotten an idea or inspiration from reading one of them. And really at the lowest point of my burnout, I could get beautiful emails from readers telling me how much this content and the interviews meant to them, and I would completely disregard it because our readership wasn't growing. We didn't get 10 more subscribers that day or 100 more subscribers that week. And so I completely disregarded kind of the incredibleness of what people were telling me about the site and what resonated with them. This is one of my favorite photos. I was interviewing a designer at Medium, and Matt was really good at kind of capturing my authentic self, which is pretty nerdy and awkward. And I'm pushing up my glasses with my finger, which is really cool. So I want to be super clear. My fuck-ups in this presentation are not losing my job. It wasn't that I wasn't able to figure out how to make money from ways we work. And it wasn't even the failed acquisition. When I look back on that, I think I dodged a bullet on not selling Ways We Work to Envision, because we would have been doing a totally different job than we were doing, and they would now own all the content. So I still own Ways We Work. The website is still up, even though we're not actively contributing to it. So I actually think the fuck-up would have been selling to them. So what are my fuck-ups? What's the message that I want to get across? My fuck-up was that I lost sight of what I wanted from the website. I got really caught up in what other people defined as success. Making money, getting a lot of views, a lot of hits. And I went and did the site full-time because I got fired, not because I actually intentionally chose to do it and that I thought it was the right move. And then the other fuck-up was that I had this mentality that if I just worked harder, then I would be successful. If I just kept going, if I just sent 1 million more emails or reached out to 100 more people, that I would be successful. And I think, to be quite honest, in my experience, working harder is almost never the answer. Maybe working more intentionally, working differently, but working harder is what kept me sort of spinning out in this burnout. And so I think if you take anything away, it's to be really intentional about what you want and what you value in any venture that you take on, whether it's a job, whether you're an entrepreneur, whatever it is. And then, really be intentional with how you do that and how you go about it. And that the third is that work-life balance, or whatever we're calling it these days, it's not a nice to have. It's 100% a necessity if you want to do anything for a long period of time. Thanks.
Amandah, thank you so much for sharing your story. It was really powerful, and the lessons, I think, can be applicable to anybody in the audience. I think as entrepreneurs or as professionals at the top of our fields, our identity is so embedded with what we're doing, and there's really a power to knowing when is the right time to walk away and when it's time to sort of focus on something else. So congratulations to you, and really amazing story. So let's hand it over to you guys to ask some questions. Who wants to kick it off?
So my question to you is, when you did decide to start looking for new jobs, where did you find that motivation, and what was that period like for you? Because I can imagine it would be a difficult decision. And
That's a really good question. I think I was at the point where there was just not a choice really anymore. The failed acquisition like hit me very hard because I had really invested everything in that, and that was kind of like my last ditch effort. So when that happened, it was like rock bottom for me. I was like, there's nowhere else to go. But what I did have was I had a really incredible community that I had built through Ways We Work and a network. So I wrote a super honest Medium post about Ways We Work and why it had failed. And the list of skills I thought I maybe had coming out of it, and that if anyone wanted to hire me, I was available for hire. So that worked incredibly well.
You mentioned all these options for like the way that Ways We Work could have gone, mostly from a monetization perspective. But I'm curious, like you never touched on the option of continuing to do it for free on the side. Is that something that you ever think about, or like, because it seemed like that's why you started in the first place? Yeah. I don't know.
No, super good question. I didn't have time really to cover it in this presentation, but the thing that really sucked, and I think my biggest fuck up of all, was that I let myself get so burnt out that I hated Ways We Work. As soon as I was done with it, I was like, I'm putting it away, and so it's sat on a shelf for 2 years now. But I have recently been thinking about going back to it, so stay tuned.
So,
is someone else
over here.
speaking?
The way that you chose to look for work is super vulnerable. What made you decide to look for work that way instead of your traditional job search or reaching out to your network, you know, the way that people typically do that?
I really needed a job ASAP, is the one answer. And then, I don't know, you can probably tell from just giving this talk tonight, like, that it's kind of something that I really believe in. I really believe in vulnerability. I believe in kind of like just being yourself and being open. And that was what the whole site was about. So for me, it kind of just felt natural to do it that way. It was sort of like I had this community of people who were sharing their challenges and struggles with me, and it was really, it was a good thing for me to share back. Sorry, yeah, there's a question over here.
Yeah, sorry. That was great. I loved that whole talk. So you got pretty clear on the things that you like, love, and valued from the website. How or what are you translating from that into your new work?
Oh God, hard question. Good question though. I think the biggest thing I learned was that I really love working with people. I always thought of myself as a bit of an introvert, and I am an introvert, but I also get a lot of energy from like a sense of community and doing things with people. So I really learned that, and that's like a value that I know I'll always kind of have going forward. I think the other things are, the one thing that I keep saying and that I learned through the site was there's this idea or this phrase that goes around that's like, if you do work you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And I just kind of wanted to call bullshit on that. Because doing work you love is actually way harder than doing work you don't care about. You invest so much more and you're in it so much more personally. And so in my job, for example, that I do here at Shopify now, I always try and remember that like people here, for the most part, are doing work that they're really passionate about and that they love, and like we really have to respect that and sort of do whatever we can to support that. So that's something that I really carry forward in my role specifically now.
Hi, thanks for the talk. And from all your interviews with all the different teams and people, what would you say is the one thing that showed up the most, like the most important thing that you came by from that's common to a lot of different teams?
I think the biggest thing I took away was sort of what makes people stay in a job and what makes people leave. And it came from an interview with the VP of Design at BuzzFeed, Cap Watkins at the time, but this was a theme that I saw throughout all of my interviews. How does he put it? He's like, when I'm in a job, I need to first care about the things that we're trying to solve, so it's care about the challenges, because what he says is there's going to be problems in every single workplace, right, every single team, but you need to, one, care about the problems that you're trying to solve, and two, be empowered to solve them. So if you don't have both of those things, then that's a signal that it's time to move on and move to a different role or a different company or whatever it might be. And that was the biggest thing I saw from everyone, was just like, you have to care about what you're doing in order for it to continue being exciting, but not only that, you actually have to be in a place where you're empowered to do something about it.
Perfect. I think that's a great place to end it on the Q&A. Amandah, thank you so much again for sharing your story.